In 1926, for the first time in a long time, Europe dared to breathe again. 8 years had passed since the Great War ended. The trenches were silent. The guns that once shook continents had rusted away. The old empires, German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, were gone, confined to the pages of history. On the surface, Europe looked different. Cities were rising from the rubble. Railways hummed with life, connecting a continent that was stitching itself back together. Factories were churning out goods, and markets were full. For the first time since 1914, life for ordinary people felt almost normal. But 1926 wasn't just about rebuilding walls and bridges. It was about rebuilding trust. The scars of war were still visible everywhere. Across northern France and Belgium, endless fields of white crosses stretched beneath gray skies, each one a life cut short. Rebuilt villages stood beside fields where millions had fought and died. Even now, farmers plowing their land would sometimes unearth unexploded bombs. Silent reminders that the war still slept just below the surface. The land remembered. At the heart of this fragile recovery stood Germany. Just 3 years earlier, in 1923, the country had been decimated by hyperinflation. People's life savings became worthless overnight. Workers were paid twice a day because their money lost value within hours. Hunger and anger filled the streets. But by 1926, the situation looked stable. A new currency brought order. Foreign loans, especially from the United States, fueled a massive industrial boom. Berlin was reborn, becoming one of Europe's most modern and energetic cities. Cinema, theater, and music flourished. Construction cranes dotted the skyline, painting a picture of progress and hope. Then, in September 1926, something truly historic happened. Germany was admitted into the League of Nations. This was a powerful symbol of reconciliation. The former enemy of Europe was now welcomed into the fold of international diplomacy. It was a sign that peace was no longer just a piece of paper, it was becoming a living, breathing cooperation. German Foreign Minister Gustav Stresemann worked closely with his French counterpart, Aristide Briand, to ease the tensions that had torn their nations apart. Both men knew that another cycle of revenge would only lead to another war. Their efforts were celebrated across Europe. Newspapers hailed a new era. Politicians spoke of lasting stability. And for the first time in a long time, citizens allowed themselves a sense of cautious optimism. But the peace of 1926 rested on a delicate balance. Germany's entire recovery was built on borrowed money. If those international loans stopped, economic collapse could return in an instant. The wounds of the Treaty of Versailles, which had ended the war, still stung deeply. Many Germans felt their nation had been unfairly punished, and national pride remained incredibly fragile. Peace was not yet rooted in solid ground. It was built on foundations of sand. France, while encouraged by the diplomatic progress, remained wary. The memory of invasion and occupation was still fresh. Entire regions of the country had been annihilated between 1914 and 1918. Nearly every family had lost someone. Victory had come at a staggering cost. So while French leaders supported cooperation, they also continued to strengthen their defenses. They believed peace required preparation for the worst. Meanwhile, Britain was facing its own internal struggles. In May 1926, a general strike brought the country to a standstill. Coal miners protested against wage cuts and dangerous working conditions. For 9 days, trains stopped, industries shut down, and even newspapers fell silent. It wasn't a military conflict, but it exposed the deep economic strain left by the war. Britain's old industries were weakened. Post-war competition and massive debt created widespread hardship. Even the victors were struggling to adjust to the new realities of peacetime. The consequences of the war were not just political, they were deeply economic and social. And across the continent, the veterans of the war continued to fight their own quiet battles. Many had returned home in 1918 expecting stability and recognition. By 1926, some had managed to rebuild their lives, with families and jobs. But so many more were still suffering. The psychological trauma, then called shell shock, was poorly understood. Nightmares, anxiety, and a profound emotional distance haunted countless former soldiers. Governments built grand memorials for the dead, but support for the living was tragically limited. The war had officially ended, but for many who fought it, it never truly left. At the same time, European society was in the middle of a massive cultural transformation. The younger generation, scarred by what they had witnessed, rejected the blind nationalism that led to the slaughter. Writers exposed the raw horrors of trench warfare. Artists abandoned old traditions and embraced the bold new styles of modernism. Jazz music, vibrant and alive, filled dance halls in Paris and Berlin. These cities became pulsating centers of creativity. There was a desperate hunger for life. After years of death and destruction, people wanted movement, music, and modernity. They wanted proof that humanity could progress beyond violence. And so, 1926 felt like a year of belief. Belief that diplomacy could replace conflict. Belief that economic cooperation could prevent disaster. Belief that humanity had finally learned from its most terrible mistakes. Germany's entry into the League of Nations was the cornerstone of that belief. It suggested that former enemies could sit at the same table and solve their problems with words, not weapons. But history teaches us that appearances can be deceiving. The economic recovery was dangerously dependent on international stability. Political extremism hadn't vanished, had only gone into hiding, and national pride across Europe remained a sensitive, volatile force. The peace of 1926 was real, but it was incredibly vulnerable. Looking back, 1926 feels like a pause in history. A quiet interlude. There were no major battles, no dramatic revolutions, no sudden collapses. Instead, there was a sense of cautious confidence. Ordinary people worked, married, raised children, and rebuilt their homes. Diplomats negotiated instead of threatening. The continents seemed to be moving forward, together. And yet, beneath that calm surface, unresolved tensions were simmering. The Great War had changed Europe forever. It had shattered empires, destroyed economies, and fundamentally redefined national identities. In 1926, Europe was trying to reinvent itself not as a battlefield of rival powers, but as a community seeking shared stability. Whether that beautiful vision could survive would depend on wisdom, patience, and restraint. 1926 was the year Europe truly believed in peace. It believed that cooperation could overcome centuries of resentment. It believed that diplomacy could replace the cycle of destruction. It believed, with all its heart, that the tragedy of the Great War would never, ever be repeated. For a brief, shining moment, that belief felt strong enough to change the world. But peace is not permanent. It must be actively protected, every single day. And sometimes, the quietest years in history are the ones that carry the deepest uncertainty. In 1926, Europe stood perfectly balanced between hope and hidden danger, walking carefully into a future it could not yet see. Thanks for watching. If you found this story interesting, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the past. See you next time.